across some of the security solutions, or some of the data management stuff, right? They work across cloud partners or different cloud providers. So, I think working inside of that ecosystem and really understanding what your intention is, and being intentional as you're selecting your different vendors, and asking that question, hey, how does this work inside of an Amazon environment? How does this work inside of a Google environment? How does this work inside of Oracle? Make them show you, right? Look for that single pane of glass. Look for those different integration points, and really do your due diligence to be able to see, is it really portable, or are they just saying that it works across different clouds?
Thank you, Jeff. Yeah, that was very detailed. Great answer. Great response. Yeah, that was really cool. Greg, if you wanted to go ahead and add anything to that.
I think the one thing, if we want to talk about data portability, is that if you're a customer, you really need to use containers to move data from one place to the other. I think that's a very important factor. I also think, though, that when you're moving from a single cloud to multi-cloud, you really have to understand, kind of when, where, and why you want to do that. And I think that's a basic business fundamental. I'm sorry to keep hitting up on the security piece, but when you go multi-cloud, you really need to boost your security. And I think, another thing that you might want to consider is some third-party monitoring as well. But Jeff nailed it on the head, especially on the vendor agnostic piece.
All right, should be next question, please. As we see increasing trends toward remote work, how can hybrid cloud solutions support a distributed workforce and enable seamless collaboration? Okay, Jeff, I'll go ahead and give this to you since you're a vendor, and I'm sure you've been dealing with this type of issue since COVID with remote work and the cloud solutions.
Yeah, this kind of goes back to that cloud chaos, right? In terms of what are the benefits of cloud and remote work, right? There's really two pieces that cloud has enabled customers to take advantage of. One is being able to move the application and or the data to where the people are, right? And so, as I was mentioning, I'm in the furthest west point in the connected 48 states right now, right? I can move my data and my applications with me. When I go back to the East Coast where I live, I can move my applications and I can move my data with me. And so, the cloud is really allowing people to have the best possible user experience while also looking at the factors like cost. And Greg keeps talking a lot about the compliance, right? If I go over the border from here into Canada, I don't have the same level of access, because now all of a sudden our security profiles kick in. So it's very, very interesting in terms of how we can now have the applications and the data follow the people as they start to move about. The second thing I'd say is around elasticity, right? Is being able to meet the remote workforce demands when they're working and when the resources are needed, right? So when VMware originally started our business, we talked about being able to split computing horsepower amongst different applications, and now we can actually spin up and down demand for those computing resources in a real-time fashion, without having all of this burden of cost, without having all of this extra hardware and horsepower sitting in a data center just waiting for me to wake up and turn on my computer and start doing work. So the cloud has really allowed the users and the data and the applications to travel. And then it's really allowed them that elasticity to spin up and spin down as the users actually need it.
Thanks, Jeff. Greg, do you have anything you'd like to add?
Yeah, I just would say that, in my opinion, cloud is the backbone of remote work. It's really allowed us to do that so effectively. And the one thing that I will add is, and probably everybody's used to remote work, but at least in my last company, we were very focused on products for remote work. And you just need to keep it simple, because we have to remember that our people are working from a remote location where they don't have IT support. So, the mantra there is keep it simple, stupid. So it's easy for them to access it. It has to be secure, obviously, and I'm going to keep harping on that, but keep it simple, stupid is the key.
Nope, agreed. Makes sense. Totally agreed. Should be next question, please. Should be. Next question, please. In your opinion, what are key factors that organizations should consider when selecting cloud providers and services for their hybrid cloud setup? Jeff, would you like to start out with this? I'm sure you have more to put more input.
Yeah, I'll go back to my original comments around this intelligent workload placement. I think I'm going to get the bumper sticker and the T-shirt made around this and see if I can monetize it at all. But for me, it's really looking at all of those different things that we've been outlining. Security, cost, compliance, location, and doing a really proper application discovery will really highlight where that application or those set of applications or that infrastructure needs to go. And I think that the better people do on that front end, the more it's going to show them what is the appropriate cloud, right? Mm-hmm. Is it a SQL database? Maybe a SQL database makes sense to go inside of a Microsoft platform, right? Maybe it's a big data and you're using Google's big data query. Well, putting your application next to that big data query makes sense because you're going to lower your latency and your time to response between the applications and the data set. So, what I really, really, really harp on people on is doing that proper application discovery. And more times than not, the proper destination is going to unveil itself to you versus you having to go out and find it. So, Greg, I don't know if you have any other thoughts on that.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a couple things that are really important, right? Beyond just what Jeff had said. I think service and support is a very important factor here. I think that you also want to delve into the product and service roadmap. Where are these vendors going? What's their thought? What's their thought coming back to that innovation point that I made earlier? What are the certifications that they have, right? And the best thing that I always do when I'm talking about switching vendors or adding vendors is pulse your network. Talk to reference customers. Don't be afraid to talk to your peers about what they're using and what their experience has been. And I think those are really important, factors when considering, vendors.
Yeah, I think one other piece also, Greg, that you were talking about a little bit there is also looking internally at your skill set, right? What is the skill set of your organization, right? And so as you may be most excited about going into Google's cloud, right? But you may not have the resources to be able to take on a new cloud provider and a new set of operating procedures. So I would also say looking internally and making sure that you don't overextend yourself, right? Because you may think that latest whiz bang thing is going to solve all the world's problems, but if you can't support it, if you can't make it secure, if you can't operationalize that, it really does you no good, right?
Absolutely.
No, absolutely agree. Very good point. Very good point. Definitely customization on what the company needs for their cloud from their cloud providers. Shubi, next question, please. Hybrid multi-cloud is often seen as a way to avoid vendor lock-in. How can organizations balance vendor diversifications and maintain a cohesive and manageable cloud environment? Jeff, would you like to go first or Greg? I don't mean to keep coming at you, Jeff.
I'm gonna take Greg's lead on this one. So Greg, why don't you go for it?
Well, thank you. We see who the favorite is, that's for sure. Okay. Anyway, sorry, Tia. Again, I think that having a single pane of glass is very important. And to pull on the thread that Jeff brought up, and this is something that I experienced at my last company, is that if you are not cross-training your employees on the different cloud technologies, you're going to fail. And I was running a small company. I had a team of 2 on Azure and a team of 2 on AWS. And again, small company. And shame on us for allowing our 2 Microsoft people to go on vacation. They were not cross-trained and we had an issue and we were in trouble, right? So again, I think that if you have the ability to cross-train your employees on multiple technologies kind of across your tech stack, the better off you're going to be. And again, I understand there's limitations to that, but that's really a key point for me. Go ahead, Jeff.
Yeah. That was your mistake of letting people go on vacation, Greg. So that's
exactly
that's a leadership issue. But for me, it's finding some good partners out there in the ecosystem to work with, right? And so while Greg is talking about some of those resource constraints, I would say reach outside, into your network of your partners. Here at VMware, we work with a lot of great partners who have expertise across all of the different clouds. And whether it's resource augmentation when, God forbid, you let people go on vacation, or it's allowing them to do a little bit of exploration in terms of some other unique services that are out there. I would say the partner community and that ecosystem of integrators that are out there, I've seen come a long way. Before, a lot of them were talking specifically about hardware-based solutions and getting more infrastructure and refreshing infrastructure inside of your own private data center. But there are a lot of what we call cloud-first partners that have very, very deep benches in terms of their experience with different cloud providers. So, I would say reach out to those ecosystems. A lot of times they'll give you assessment services. They'll allow you to do some try and buy stuff. You can do a fair amount on their dime to be able to get a little bit of experience. And then also a lot of them do have staff aug opportunities for you to be able to take advantage of some of their people. Maybe it's to cross-train your people or just to do some experimentation.
No, that's a great idea to tag along with your partners if you have that type of issue, especially going on vacation together. Okay, question 9. Okay, there we go. Shuby, you're good. The public sector has unique requirements when it comes to adapting cloud technologies. How can hybrid multi-cloud solutions benefit government organizations while addressing their specific challenges? Greg, I'll have you go first since you swear Jeff my favorite.
That's okay. Everybody needs a favorite, so the vendor needs to be the favorite here. That's all good. Sorry, T, you set me up for that one. I think the amazing thing about the federal government is the diversification of requirements and needs across each one of the individual agencies. I mean, if you think about the variation between the Department of Defense and a civil agency, there's massive differences, right? So it's very difficult to find one solution that fits all. But I do think that you really need to have vendors that have the capabilities of being entirely flexible, right from an on-prem cloud solution to a hybrid cloud to a public cloud, all the way out to the edge. And I think that is really, really important. And I think that you have to keep your employees and your vendors, in their roles, to ensure, kind of that complete data transfer from whatever cloud environment you're in out to the edge. I really think that this is a great question for Jeff because he focuses directly on the public sector. So I'm going to turn it over to Jeff on this one because I'm sure he has a lot of good comments.
Yeah, no, and thanks. And it's interesting. And I think on the next question we can talk a little bit more about edge-based computing. But when I look at the difference in my world of the public sector versus my counterparts' world in the commercial and in the corporate world, there's really two big differences that I see. One is around cost, right? Just because you're processing more doesn't mean that you're creating more revenue or you're creating more money or you have more availability to money. And literally in some of our customer cases, it takes acts of Congress to be able to get more money to be able to do things. So, if it's the IRS application that's doing all of the income process or the income tax return processing, and they've processed more returns in December and used up their entire budget because they've processed more returns, well, they still have to process until April 15th, right? And so, just because you can have these dynamic ebbs and flows and elasticity and all this great stuff, all of that comes at a cost, right? And you don't have unlimited funds to be able to say, hey, well, I processed more, so I should be able to get access to more money. So when I look at how organizations inside of my world handle cost and cost monitoring, it's super, super important for people to have, Greg, as you had mentioned, that single pane of glass and to understand cost control and what to do when they're starting to run hot, right? How am I actually going to throttle the applications, or how am I going to work inside of my community or my hybrid cloud infrastructure to be able to maintain and to control those costs? Because I've seen organizations, one of my favorites was a research institution. The researcher went on vacation or went on sabbatical for 6 months and came back to an over $100,000 bill because they left their instance running while they were gone on vacation, right, or on sabbatical. So, I see that really as a big one. And then the other big one for my customers is around compliance, right? Is really understanding, how can I gain that compliance? Greg, you mentioned talking about roadmaps and talking about how to work within that community around what their roadmaps of innovation are going to be. It's, how are they going from IL5 to IL6? How are they going from secret to top secret? How are they creating environments where you can have secure communications in a SCIF? How am I going to take my information up into space? How am I going to sink it deep inside of the sea in a submarine, right? There's all of these interesting compliance questions that come up with my customers in terms of how am I going to make sure that this data is going to be secure, and how am I going to make sure that, just because they say, hey, I can instantly move something from here to here, is that actually okay for your data, right? Is that actually okay for your compliance threshold to be able to do that? And again, working with your vendor community and working with your partners will really help you figure out what those Google Maps directions are to be able to handle your workloads inside of a hybrid public cloud.
Thank you, Jeff. Very detailed answer. Can we go on to the last question, please? Looking into the future, what trends or advancements do you anticipate in the hybrid cloud space, and how can businesses and government entities prepare for these changes? Greg, I won't ask Jeff the last question.
Sorry.
No, you're fine.
No, I'm good. I think there's three things that we need to really focus on. The first one is regulation. I do think that there's going to be more regulation coming down the path, probably more so in terms of vendor diversification. The second thing I think we all need to be cognizant of is zero trust, right? I think that We are all working very diligently on zero trust solutions, and I think those are going to be incorporated into the cloud sooner rather than later. And then the trend that I think we have to all pay attention to, which I think will down the road help people, is vendor consolidation. I think that you'll start to see more and more vendors, especially more newer entrants, get gobbled up by some of the big players. And I think that down the road, having a complete stack or one throat to choke for your entire solution is going to be a great benefit and a cost savings. So I think those are the three trends, Tia, that I see that are going to be important going forward.
Agreed, especially regulation. Jeff, anything to add there?
Yeah, I would say, I'll bring up what I think's a good trend, and maybe I'll start with a maybe not as positive of a trend, but I'll start there is how are you going to get your data back? Right. And I think what we're starting to see is people looking at things like repatriation of workloads, because they're not getting the cost benefits that they thought they might have gotten out of public cloud. I think looking at security events, what happens when Amazon goes down, right? What happens when Azure goes down? How do you actually get access to these applications? What if there is a massive security event at one of these large public cloud providers? Do you have the ability to get your data back, right? So I think that that's one thing that we're now starting to see as we kind of went through this cloud first, cloud chaos, and cloud smart journey is how are you actually getting your data back, and how can you work? We see all these ransomware events where people have their their servers encrypted and all of that kind of stuff. Imagine, God forbid, that happened inside of AWS, or imagine if that happened inside of Azure, right? And they lock out all of those servers. I'm sure people are trying on a minute-by-minute basis to do that. But it's really looking at a data recovery strategy and looking at a business resiliency strategy. How do you get that data back? And I think organizations are starting to look at and need to focus. And I think we're going to see a lot more of that. Is maybe public cloud isn't the best for my environment, and maybe having some public and some opportunity to get the data back on premises makes a lot of sense for an organization. One of the exciting trends, and I did spend a little bit of time at AWS as well, was really looking at edge computing, right? Bringing the cloud out into the edge is something that I see a huge need for. So it's how do you take it out of these big data centers? Maybe for latency, you need to have it in a certain area, or maybe because you're operating in an austere or a forward operating position. How do you bring those services down to where the people actually are? So, I see some very, very exciting trends around very, very small, portable, mobile form factors, being able to bring those clouds to where the people are and where they're operating. And I think that there's a lot of horsepower and a lot of innovation going into edge computing to be able to gobble up as much data as possible. It's amazing. We just went through an entire webinar. We didn't mention AI, ML, or any of that kind of stuff. So I think this might be a first over the past 6 months in webinar history here. But getting the services down to the people, getting them to where that processing needs to happen, and having real-time access to cloud services is a very exciting trend that I see a lot of positive movement on.
Agreed, especially what you just brought up. Now, speaking on AI and zero trust, I appreciate both of your time. Those were really, really detailed and good answers. Shubi, can we open it up for Q&A? Can you go on to the next slide for a Q&A?
We can have a discussion.
Okay.
Yeah.
Questions, if you guys would like, you can open up the floor for questions. Either put them in the chat or just unmute yourself. Do they have the power to unmute? And if you guys have any questions, any of the attendees. No questions? All right. Well, thank you so much, Jeff and Greg, for your time. We really appreciate it. This was a great federation. Like I said, very detailed questions coming from Jeff and Greg also. I do not have a favorite. I just want to make that clear.
There's got to be a theme of every webinar, right? So that could be our theme.
Well, I really appreciate you guys' time. Thank you so much. Thank you for all the attendees. And of course, my information is there as well as vTech's. Like we said, thank you again. You all have a good day.
Thanks, Tia. Appreciate it. Thanks, everybody.
Guys.
Thanks, Jeff.
You too. Thanks, Greg.
Thanks, Jeff and Greg.